This podcast is made possible in part through a partnership with TrueFire. TrueFire is the most comprehensive guitar learning experience on the internet, with over 51,000 guitar lessons from the best educators in the world. It makes TrueFire the #1 most trusted music education resource for guitar players. We as guitar players sometimes get fixated on the gear that we play, and we neglect the skill level that we play. And many of us have a hard time finding instructors locally. TrueFire bridges that gap. You can find my affiliate link below to get 40% off with my code 40watt of your first purchase through TrueFire. Learn, practice, play, TrueFire. This podcast is made possible by the support of many wonderful people over on Patreon. If you would like to support this show and help make sure it keeps going, you can go over to patreon.com/40wattpodcast, where for as little as $3 a month, you can help make sure this show keeps happening. Thank you for all of your support. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's episode of the 40 Watt Podcast. I'm so happy to have y'all here this week. I'm super excited about this episode, y'all. This is one of those rare episodes where I asked someone to come on the show. They said yes. I sent them the scheduling link, and they actually booked. I didn't have to come back a week later, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, say, hey, you still interested in being on the show? Because usually what happens, I either get left on red, which happens, or somebody says, yeah, I'd love to do it. That'd be awesome. And then never schedules. I'm like, oh, this is awful. But this time that didn't happen. But before we get into it, I want to thank all of my Patreon supporters over on patreon.com/40wattpodcast. Y'all help make this show happen. Literally all of the overhead costs get covered through Patreon. I appreciate all that support. Make sure you click the links below. Also click follow, subscribe, bell icon, whatever your media of choice says to do to get notifications about when this show comes out. Make sure you click those things. Rate and review, thumbs up, or thumbs down. YouTube counts it as interaction anyway, so I'd prefer you thumbs up, but if you're unhappy with the content, thumbs down it. Comment, all those things help make this podcast keep happening, and I greatly appreciate the support. Also, last week I called y'all out for needing to practice more and not buy more gear, so there's still links below for TrueFire, so you can get some lessons down there. That is an affiliate link. I get a little kickback when you subscribe, and I've got a code for your first time purchase for 40% off, so make sure you click that. All right, having said all that, I'm super excited to get in this episode with Meredith Coloma from Coloma Guitars. I hope I'm pronouncing everything correctly.
Yes.
If I'm not, please tell me, and I will try to correct it. So right. Meredith, how are you?
I'm good. It's a casual Sunday afternoon at our house. We live in a bit of a zoo. We've got 2 cats and 2 dogs, and they're all asleep right now, which is amazing.
That's a miracle. I mean, we need to note the day. So I got really hip to your guitars, like a lot of people did. I feel like through TikTok. You kind of blew up on TikTok there a little bit, and I followed your journey into guitars. But for our listeners who maybe know nothing, let's assume they know nothing. How'd you get into music? How'd you get into guitar? How'd you get into building guitars?
I don't know if we have enough time. I've lived 10 lives. But I was a touring musician. I was a weirdo who sat in my bedroom as a kid and played the Irish fiddle. And I got really good at that. And at 14, I started touring with bands. And that's how I got into music. My mom was an Irish dance teacher, and I was lazy. I didn't want to dance. So the other option was to sit at the side of the stage and play. And I was obsessed. I loved the violin. So I did that for many years. I became an Irish Sligo-style fiddle champion and the West Coast fiddle champion. Toured with old man bands. There's a lot of blue-haired women in the audiences of those tours. But it was great. I got paid. I didn't have to go to high school. It was amazing. So I did the touring thing for a while, and then started playing guitar and got hired with other musicians. And I wanted to be a musician. I was a singer as well, became a singer-songwriter. And the guitar building thing was to supplement my life as a musician. I was too young to go into a venue after a show, because we'd do Put-in-Bay, Ohio, for instance. A random town, we'd play bar after bar after bar on that strip. And I was 16, 17, 18. So we were in the States and I wasn't of age to hang out. So I would have to go somewhere. And all the broken stuff would get shoved in the van or at a motel or wherever we were staying. And those were my friends. That's all I had
Oh,
to, it was before the time of cell phones. It's not like if I wanted to call my mom, I'd have to go to a gas station.
right.
Um, so I had random dollar stores and hardware stores and a lot of very messed up touring rigs. So that was kind of like it was what I could do to pass the time. And then I was a shy kid and I really wanted a record deal. So I went to acting school in New York. I was the poor kid accepted to Lee Strasberg Theater School in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were like, they kind of had like a pity hire type of thing where they're like, oh, we have all these rich kids and celebrities kids going to this school. We'll pick some random kid from East Vancouver, Canada. And that was a really scary time. I thought I wanted to be a performer on stage. I was terrified. But every day walking home from Lee Strasberg Theater Academy, there was a violin maker. And I would hang out at a shop every day. And suddenly I was like, oh, this is a job. Like you can do this every day and you don't have to, present yourself as this character on stage. So it was
Right.
kind of this like weird thing where I was balancing these two worlds, but they actually kind of met at a really great point. It was useful to be able to repair my own instruments and fix them as a musician. So again, it wasn't really my job. It was kind of an interest. And this guy was like, hey, if you want to continue, like there's schools for this. And that's when my whole world changed. So I went to guitar building school and I left there, did an apprenticeship with Roger Sadowski.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, so I was in school and I was building these instruments. They weren't really the quality. Like I didn't understand why they weren't as good as I wanted them to be. As a player, I was like, yeah, I'm making guitars, but they're not great guitars. So I built four,
Hmm.
and I didn't feel like I was getting, when I was asking questions, I wasn't getting the right answers. So before, in my touring days, everybody played a Sadowski guitar or a Sadowski bass, especially in the recording studios. Rather than bring two basses to the gig, they'd have one. And the Sadowski preamp is legendary in recording
Yes.
studios. So I just emailed Roger Sadowski out of the blue. I think I was 18 years old, 17 or 18. And I said, hey, I'm in guitar building school. I've built these instruments. They suck. Like, what do I do? So he messaged me. He's like, whenever you're in New York, come by the shop and show me your guitars and I'll tell you. So I booked a trip. Then I was in New York at 7 a.m. in the morning the next day. And I
Oh,
knocked on
wow.
his door at 8 o'clock. um, and he kind of opened the door as he just got into the shop. And he's like, Meredith? Yep. Hey, here are my things. No regard for anyone's space or time. I was just
Right.
this naive kid. Like I so badly wanted something.
Yeah.
Um,
How we
so
do when we
he
get
was
excited
amused.
about something.
Absolutely. And yeah, he was great. Like he went over each instruments and he's like, your fretwork, it's not good. It's terrible. And I was like, okay, makes sense. Total sense. It's
Hmm.
unplayable. He's like, your neck carves are great, but the frets, that's what you need to do. So I started working the next day um, at his place as an apprentice.
Oh, wow.
I did fret work for 9 months. That's all I did before I could move on to any other task. And he always jokes. He's like, nobody lasts on frets longer than a month. They bitch and complain and want to do something else. Excuse my language.
Yeah. Oh, you're fine.
Um, but he was kind of like, you just went for it and I was going to let you do it because nobody else wanted to do it. And then after 9 months, he sat me down and he was like, okay, so you got it. This is great. let's get you onto other types of the build. But me with my
Yeah.
obsession, I'm like, I just want to do these things. Yeah, I was
It's like
working
we
for
think you've got
Roger.
frets now. We think you've got them at this point. So
Yeah, maybe. But that's the thing. It's once I started my own business, I worked for every repair shop in my area
hmm
because they would just do setups. They didn't take fretworks. And I can do a
Oh,
full refret in less than an hour.
wow.
And it's just what I do because that's what I did for
Right.
5 or 6 days a week for, a long time. So I'm so grateful that I had that. It was torture, but if I hadn't had that, I would have never had the funds to support my business and start my own thing because every other shop was reliant on me. I could charge what I wanted to, but also knew that those shops knew I would get it back to them within days instead of
Yeah.
months or weeks. So it did help. Sorry, this is a long story.
No, it's fine.
Then I left Roger because my visa expired for the States. And I went to Michael Dunn because I was a big gypsy jazz person. As a violinist and
Sure.
fiddler, I like Stefan Grappelli. So in my hometown, Vancouver, one of my hometowns, was Michael Dunn. And I showed up at his doorstep saying, hey, I just built a bunch of basses, guitars, and arch tops, and I want to build gypsy jazz guitars, and you're the guy. So he just said, no, absolutely not. I don't take apprentices, and I don't want anybody in my shop. I have it in my home. I don't want to be elbow to elbow with a weirdo.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, cool. Totally fair. And then I talked to everybody in the music community. I was like, hey, do you know Michael Dunn? And they're like, oh, yeah, we used to be in a band with him. I was like, cool. Can I just I showed up at every gig. I went, stalked him. I'm really good at stalking. Um, and he finally, it was 2 months later, and he called me back because I had put my resume in his mailbox. And I said, even I will pay you for a 30-minute phone call. I love your guitars. So he phoned me and he said, I cannot go anywhere without hearing your goddamn name.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, oh, great. It's working. you know? So I went over. He's like, come over for tea. My wife, Eleanor, would love to meet you. And I was like, sweet, get in with the wife. Uh,
Right.
so we chatted, we had tea, we talked about, he speaks Spanish. My family's Chilean, but he learned Spanish guitars in Mallorca. Um, so we just kind of bonded, and he's like, this is weird. I don't generally like, young kids, but you're fine, fine. So I started working for him, and I worked for him for about 2.5 years.
That's
So
awesome.
overall, I've done like 4 or 5 years worth of apprenticeships. And that's completely unpaid. It was just I wanted
Right.
I wanted to learn, I wanted to be good.
Yeah,
And
well,
I wanted
that kind of education a lot of people pay for. So
exactly, yeah. And like Luthier school was not cheap, but I
no.
found that the real world aspect of learning someone's process, but also learning that every luthier has their own different way of doing something. There's a million different ways to build a guitar, and one is not necessarily better than the other. It's just what you like. So, yeah. So that was how I got into guitar building. Yeah, I did a lot of
That's
apprenticeships.
that's a really awesome story of just being tenaciously after how to do this and how to do it right. Because there's a lot of
Yeah.
folks out there that get into it, they build a guitar and then they start a company and they're like, I can build guitars now, and
Yeah.
you pursued it to the nth degree, and especially you did it over various styles. I love the idea that you went into you've gone from playing violin, hanging out in violin shop, making electric guitars, making arch tops, then making gypsy jazz guitars, which are a totally other, that's a whole other animal of a guitar. i've
Yeah.
i've,
Yeah.
I've picked a couple up over the years. You don't see a lot of those in Mississippi, for what it's worth.
I bet
But
not.
no. So I've only picked up a couple over the years, and it's a different experience. It's a completely
Yeah.
it's a lot of the parts are there, but it's not the same. So I really
Completely
the
different
build
construction.
Yeah, that's the words I was trying to get to. I'm not being particularly eloquent this morning, but that's okay
All
because
good.
it's not morning anymore. It's time change has completely messed me up, but that's okay. So
Yeah.
you're building these guitars. At what point did you decide, all right, I am I can do this as my own name, my own company?
Um, so again, I was doing this for the like I'm always interested in continually learning. I
Hmm.
like that in guitar building. Like I don't think I'll ever be a master. There's always something new to learn.
Sure.
So I was still pursuing a music career at that time, and it was kind of slow in the music industry. So I got a job at a clarinet factory, and I was like, okay, another music, like another, I can do this. This is just another
Yeah.
skill, but I get to learn how to use a lathe. So
Okay.
I was still doing music and the guitar stuff, and not really committing to guitar building yet. I was just really excited about it. 5 years later. So,
That's really committed for someone who's not committed.
I know. I'm a little obsessive. So I got a clarinet industry job during the slow part of the music thing, and I was just on the verge of a record deal. I got a record deal, but a month later, I was super, super sick. I got really
Oh.
sick and I lost my voice. And that was because of safety concerns from the clarinet factory. So I got my dream and I couldn't take it. I couldn't commit to this
Wow.
3 to 5 year contract because I was in the hospital. I had scar tissue. I could not use my voice anymore.
Oh
And
no.
that's why I had to do guitar building. That was my backup. And during, losing your voice when you're a singer and that's all your income was
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah.
But as someone with many interests, I still at least had a backup plan. So that happened in about 2012. I left
Okay.
Michael Dunn's. I went to the clarinet factory just at the end of 2012. I got that deal. And between November 2012 and April 2013, I was super sick. I ended up getting paranasal tumors, scar tissue in my
Wow.
bronchioles, just full upper respiratory issues. I still deal with it to this day. I have to be very careful. Um, but yeah, like guitar building was my fallback career, and I love it. Without it, I wouldn't have met the friends that I had, or built an amazing community, or met my wife.
Right.
So
Yeah.
everything happens for a reason. But I never intended. I accidentally became a guitar builder as a career.
Yeah. That's and I can relate way too well to the vocal issues. As someone who is sang most of their adult life myself, I have dealt with I developed nodules at one point and then went through, some rehabbing trying to avoid surgery.
Hmm. Yeah,
And then continued to have vocal issues to the point that I stopped gigging. I just didn't gig
yeah.
as much, and I didn't write any songs anymore. I'm trying to get back into songwriting, but actually,
Hmm.
I in January discovered that the source of a lot of my vocal issue has been an allergic reaction I didn't know I had.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, it's been a whole experience. Uh, that basically I couldn't use my voice either. Like I had it, but like
Yeah.
it was painful. Like
Yeah.
certain frequencies I couldn't hit at all. Like as a
Oh,
sing because as a singer I could hit them, but they would hurt.
and
um,
that's the thing.
yeah.
It's yeah. Like I don't. I from going to singing every day and then going back to a vocal coach and then going like I your body will not allow you to do this anymore. And it's like, oh, like my whole
That's
world
truly
changed.
depressing.
And
It's truly
yeah,
depressing.
there's my grieving process, like you, was stopped writing music, I stopped going to music shows,
Wow.
um, up until I think 3 or 4 years ago was when my wife was like, oh, you know what? Like that was your whole life. Let's ease you back into it. And but after that first concert, I was jealous. I loved the artists, and I was sitting in the back of the room at Fortune Sound Club in Vancouver going, that was me, you know, 8 years ago.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize that I was so still angry about it. But again, my life is great. From that came amazing things. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's part of that grieving process too, being angry that you can't do it anymore. I
yeah.
was never at the point of, getting signed or anything like that. I just writing songs and playing shows or, in the region and just having fun doing
Mm,
it. I had no aspirations of signing some kind of record deal or anything like that. I wanted to just play music and sing and make music, and not being able
yeah.
to do it. Even I'm primarily a guitarist. The singing was something that I started doing to play more guitar because
Hmm.
nobody needed a guitarist. It felt like everybody was a guitarist. So if I wanted
Yeah.
gigs, I had to start singing. And so I did,
Yeah.
and then to have that taken away, there was, and still deal with some anger and depression over that, even though I wasn't
Totally.
near that level. It's
Yeah. Also, like expressing yourself in that way is therapeutic, you know?
yes,
And then having to fight to do self therapy and things being painful. Ugh.
yeah,
Like, I can't make it through a whole song now. I can maybe sing half
wow,
of a song. And then I just get frustrated, you know?
hmm,
That's because I'm like, I know what I used to sound like. And yes, it's been so long and I've rehabbed to this point, but it's that kind of like, you know?
yeah. Oh,
So I'm sorry that
that's
happened to you. That's terrible.
yeah. No, no. I don't say it for sympathy. I say it because I can relate, and so I know how, and
Hmm.
and and I know this much of how much that sucks. So to think of it on that level, because I
Yeah.
mean, there's no better way. There's no I could be really articulate with it and really flowery words, but it just sucks. It's
Yeah.
not fair and it sucks.
Sucks.
But it has led you into making some pretty rad guitars.
Yeah.
You again, like I mentioned earlier, you kind of blew up on TikTok there for a little while.
Yeah.
Still are. I've peeled back from TikTok a lot
Me
lately.
too. Me too.
Yeah, it's just not a thing. I think I'm about to start ditching some social media actually, just in general, because it's not a
Yeah.
fun place in some places. Neither
Yep.
here nor there. Um, so which leads you to actually, so I shared a while back, you're in the process of getting a new CNC machine. You're
Hmm.
really like financially investing in this. Let's talk
Hmm.
about that a little bit, because I don't want to get to the end of this episode and then mention, oh yeah, there's this thing you can go do.
Yeah.
So we're going to do this in the middle here, especially because this has a timetable on it. So if you're
Yeah.
listening to this episode when it is released, and it should be released on, oh, I'm going to have to count, aren't I? 16th, I think, of March. Should be a Thursday. Um,
Thanks.
16th of March. So if you're listening to this when it releases, this is still current information. So
Yes.
let's talk about the fundraising effort to. You've got some killer deals on some of your instruments as well right now.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
I've stared at the page a couple of times. I'm,
Yeah.
finances,
So,
finances.
yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those things. So myself and my business partner, Will, we had
Hmm.
Pacific Wood Lab, which was a Luthier school in downtown Vancouver. Vancouver's
Okay.
not a cheap city to operate a business.
No.
Um, but we
I have
went
friends in
all in.
Vancouver. We talk about the cost of just living in Vancouver. So,
Yes. Yeah. So commercial space, all that. But we ran a very successful guitar building school. And then COVID hit. And we had a
mm,
full year's, we would book a year in advance. And people were coming from Dubai, from all over Asia, like all over the world. We
yeah,
had people coming from New York and Dublin, some people just driving up from Portland, which is below us. And so a year's worth of classes. And we got a message from the city saying, hey, COVID's a thing. You have to shut down. And we're like, okay, can we just teach one person at a time? And they're like, nope, shut down the business, close the
oh,
doors. You guys don't go in your shop. And we were forced to close. And we had 7 days to refund a year's worth of classes because we didn't want to hang on to anybody's money.
sure,
And when you're, taking money with credit cards and there's a 3 to 6% fee depending on what people use, and then there's your
yeah,
invoicing software that also takes a fee, we refunded that plus some.
Yeah.
And in the resources available for businesses took months. And then we also ended up being too successful for grants and not successful enough for loans. So
Oh,
we were in this like really weird small business area, and we were responsible. We never took out capital business loans for our workshop. So this was all personally financed.
yeah.
And that put us in a position where we thought we were being responsible, but suddenly we were a business without business credit. Like, how dumb were we? So we
Yes.
couldn't even apply for help, and it was it was a ridiculous scenario.
It's things you
So it
don't
put
think about
us,
when you
yeah,
organically start a business. It's like if you
yeah,
didn't go
yeah,
into it like, oh, here's the plan, here's the outline, here's the
hmm
steps. When you just organically create something, a lot of those steps
hmm
get missed. And then if something like this happens, you're kind of stuck.
exactly. And we were okay to float the business for a year.
Hmm.
2 years was rough. The third year, we were just like, we can't do this,
Yeah.
because we also in our after our guitar building classes, if you had completed one of our programs, you could be part of our community and go on and further start your own business in our shop. So we kind of have two areas.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, there's shop rentals was part of it, but after COVID, nobody was able to continue anything. So we had overhead for 3 years that we were paying for. And during that time, when we were slowly allowed to get back in the shop, we weren't allowed to continue lessons. But I had a lot of time at home, and my wife was redoing all the rooms. So we had our a guest room that, because we've been here since COVID, we've never really had guests. It's the cat
Right.
room. Um, but she was like, it's going to be cute with pastel colors. Like, can you make a guitar to hang on the wall? We don't have any of your guitars in our house. So I had this, what I called the Freya, because we're cat
Hmm.
people, and Freya is the Norse god who has a chariot pulled by cats, um, and a badass warrior. So
Yep.
I was like, okay, I've had this design for a while. I think that, I'm allowed back in the shop every once in a while. I'll start to build it. So I made two, a powder pink and a powder blue, and I posted them on my Instagram, and they both sold immediately. To this day, we still don't
Wow.
have one on our wall. So that's Hannah's
I
giving me
love
the
when you
side eye
set
right
out
now.
to do something and then you never get that thing done.
Right, right. Yeah, there's a lot of to-do lists that I have failed to accomplish. Uh, but it was just suddenly, like, I just shared it on my personal Facebook and my Coloma Guitars, which is kind of getting dusty at that point because I hadn't done anything for years, and that was like
Right.
this, I think 2020, late 2021.
Hmm.
So yeah, and I made like 9 Freyas
Hmm.
over the course of like 2021. 2022, I made 120.
Wow.
So it grew, like, I just couldn't make enough. And so we went from being, stuck to, like, suddenly I had this product. I wanted to run my own guitar company forever, but I
Right.
was building acoustics, and acoustics were making negative $25 an hour.
Right.
And suddenly I was able, like, tossing guitars out the shop. I would build one for myself, and someone would be like, you know what, I'm interested. I'm not going to say no. Like,
Hmm.
take it. So, and the community really rallied around it because we use local wood, we use reclaimed material. So people have that connection to Vancouver, and they're gigging musicians. It's a hub of music.
Hmm.
Um, so suddenly I had a guitar company, which was what I wanted, but that amount of growth without the infrastructure to keep it going. Like,
Yeah.
I got shoulder injuries. I'm one person. I could hire my buddy Henry, who he became a guitar builder because of COVID, because I had a shop
Right.
and he couldn't do anything. So why not utilize the space that we had? Um, so he was a friend that I made at the clarinet factory. And he always joked that I told him, like, you should be a guitar maker. 10 years later, he's a guitar maker not by choice. Uh, So he has his own company now, and that's great. But like we had one CNC that's 8 years old at this point. Um, yes, I have an amazing space and shop, but I'm one person building
Right.
100 guitars in a year. That was overkill.
That's a whole
So
lot.
yeah, yeah, but people are noticing, and that was really cool. So we are going to be we filmed Dragon's Den, which is cool, and we'll see if I make the final cut,
Yeah.
which I can't really say anyways, but
Yeah, yeah.
um yeah, like that's up to them to decide, and that's fun whether anything happens or not. It's a cool opportunity, but the fact that they noticed us enough to ask me to come on was pretty cool.
Right.
It's I think
And
It's called
for
Shark Tank in the
yeah, I was
US.
going to say
Shark
for
Tank.
listeners in the US, Dragon's Den is essentially a Shark Tank esque entrepreneur pitching their business kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, and we've had a lot of interest in investors and things like that, which is great, but I wasn't ready for that. So in
Yeah.
February, I had to take a step back and be like, okay, so now people are interested. I have a wait list of I think now we're at 180 that we haven't accepted any orders. It's just a wait list,
Wow.
um, which is great. Like that's
Yeah, no.
more than I
It's a
built in the
good
last year.
problem. Yeah, it's a great
Yeah,
problem to have.
yeah. But I'm not going to accept those orders without being able to deliver, which in the guitar building world, there's a lot of forums written about people that have taken all that and then haven't been able to deliver and disappeared. And I did not want that to be part of my story.
Yeah.
So people are scared to send deposits because it's just such a common thing.
Yep.
And also, if I accepted all those things with the prices going up of materials and things like that, I didn't want like a COVID scenario to happen where you couldn't get anything.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, so we filmed a couple TV shows. Um, I've set it up now. We've got an investor coming in July to run a full production line.
Oh,
But
that's
the
awesome.
problem is I need to train people for that full production. So we've got from now till July that I've got to train people. My CNC is down right now. Computer
Right.
kind of crapped out and drove it into the aluminum bed, and it's just not cutting accurately. So I've got to replace those things, get a CNC going, train people, and have a buffer in between when we actually go full scale. So I didn't really want to accept that financing or the investors until I knew that I could kind of jumpstart.
Yeah.
So there are a ton of people, like, I don't want my problems to be others, but a lot of people are interested in my product and they want it. So we did the Indiegogo
Hmm.
as you can get a good deal, but I'm not overwhelming myself. I'm not accepting 180 orders. I'm accepting
Right.
exactly how many I can handle and trying to be responsible that way. So yeah, the Indiegogo is just kind of to jumpstart our production so that we can prepare for when we get that large investment. And it's
Yep.
going to be super quick growth that I have base people that are trained and can handle training other people, and also have backup things made, bodies cut with right now. I'm doing everything by hand again
Mm.
because the CNC's out, so it's hand
Yeah.
routers. I always carve the necks by hand because that's what I love to do, but
Sure.
it gets when you're doing 10 to 15 a month, it's quite a lot
Yeah.
because that's not just
W-
your one job. There's 100 things.
Yeah,
So
especially when you're a one person, your neck carve, your body route, your fretting, your finishing, you know, your
absolutely
final
everything.
your final QC check. You're like,
Exactly.
is it
Setups,
intonated before it goes
electronics.
out the door? Yeah.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And yeah, so it's exciting because people are interested. But I'm thinking longevity. Can we keep it up? Like I haven't spent a dime on promoting this, like on TikTok. I was just wanting to share what I do in my daily life,
Yeah.
repairing guitars, building guitars, and people had an interest. And I feel like when you give value and you build community, it comes back eventually. So those people that were asking me, like, how do you do fretwork? Oh, that's not really something I want to do. I'm going to take it to a professional because that looks like it sucks.
Right.
Um, all those people that I just willingly shared information to are suddenly friends of mine, and they have a guitar and they can ask me about the process of building that guitar, or I film a video of the entire process. And it's such an emotional connection
Yeah.
that we've had really amazing clients.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like TikTok was really good at at least during those COVID years and coming out of it. It was initially very good at helping people find the community around the thing they were
Hmm.
interested in.
Yeah.
It's the algorithm, the big, the big boogeyman of the algorithm, uh, was surprisingly good for a long time there at bringing you
Hmm.
things that you would find interest in. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, initially my TikTok, just like probably everybody else, looked like an Instagram reel. It was a bunch of people dancing to dumb things and animal videos. Well, I worked very hard to keep the animal videos, but then I edged out all of the dancing, and it became woodworking, guitars, Dungeons and
Hmm.
Dragons, a lot of that.
Yeah.
A lot of that kind of stuff. And TikTok, it got
Yeah.
to a point where I was like, I knew I could open it and find people interested in the same things I was interested in.
Yeah. It's been great. Like I'm excited to have a marketing budget in the future.
Yes.
To see like what we can do past the I've done so many investment pitches, and they all said the same thing. They're like, how much did you spend? And I was like, $13 in 3 years. uh, and it's like, yeah. But again, using what you have. I think people, I feel like the guitar world likes to make guitar building more complicated than it actually is
Oh, yeah.
to keep people at bay. But my thought is that even if someone's interested in guitar building, doesn't mean they actually want to do it.
Yeah.
And like, I've taught over 250 students guitar building. Not all of them have started their own guitar company. It was a great time, but they go, "Oh, this is a lot of work. It's not like I make a guitar, I find, Keith Richards, hand him my guitar, and suddenly I'm famous." A lot of
Right.
people have that story in their head of like, I get to go to a party and I get to call myself guitar builder, and everybody's just gonna think I'm the coolest person ever. um,
Yeah. Well, I
yeah,
think of
like,
it the same way. Like, I would love to build a guitar, but I already know I don't want to start a guitar building company. In the
yeah,
same way that I've had pedal makers on the podcast, and I think they're lunatics, personally. Every single one of them. Anyone who is willing to enter the pedal market right now, at
right.
this
Yeah,
point, is a lunatic. Um,
yeah,
but do I want to order a couple of kits or maybe source out and build a pedal or two? Yeah, because I think that's cool.
absolutely.
Same, it's the same thing, guitar building. But I have no interest in starting a company because
Right. Because it
lunatics.
sucks.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah. But yeah, like I feel like I get these long emails about giving away trade secrets. And I'm like,
Oh
trade
my
secrets
gosh.
exist anymore. You can buy a
Mm-mm.
book, you can get free videos, you can get free content of whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm doing is just showing someone an alternative way to do something that they've seen 100 times. That's it.
Well, well, and it's like if they're really worried about trade secrets, I mean, where were they when Dan Erlewine was putting out his articles in Guitar Player magazine for
Yeah, I used to
umpteen
have those
years?
VHSs,
Yeah,
like the
yes,
VHS set. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, he
yeah,
was giving away the trade secrets for decades because, I mean, that's the
exactly.
guy who created half the trade secrets, you know?
Yes, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's that whole gatekeeping of the community
Hmm.
that some people want to do. Um,
Absolutely.
and it's
I
not good. Actually, my last guest on the podcast, I had Jake Young from Man the Helm podcast on, and we
Oh,
talked about
nice.
that whole concept of building community around guitar and
Hmm.
like where it's largely a wonderful, positive community. But every now and then you get that one yokel that wants to, scream at clouds about whatever it is. Insert inane complaint and
Yeah.
argument here. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Y'all all know the ones I'm talking about. I think I referenced people who want to talk about the op amp chips and tube screamers and how only this one's good enough or whatever it is,
Yeah.
or oh, I can't believe you used they're like tempered pine if it ain't ash or alder, which alder was
Yeah.
just a substitute for ash anyway. Anyway, you know what I mean? There's a lot of people want to like get really argumentative about some of these things, and I'm like, man, we're playing guitar here. It's like,
Well, that's the thing. And I'm not a guitar snob or
yeah,
a or like a I'm just not a snob. It's my job. And whether I'm setting up a Jay Tercer guitar or an Ibanez Prestige or some custom shop guitar, I treat them the same because someone's enjoying using it as a tool. And
yes,
people will be like, "Oh, like it's not a great guitar." I'm like, I don't care. I had a $50 Art and Luthier acoustic that my mom got me used that had toothpaste around it. I was like, "This? Did you get it off of a man from under a bridge or something?" Like, but and I love that guitar, and my sister's kids have it now. It was a great guitar,
yeah.
no shame.
No shame. Well, that's the thing is like I
Yeah.
get a lot of flack on this podcast because I do have I have some stuff that's been expensive and
Mhm.
I like that stuff. And so I've developed apparently a reputation, I've been told, for liking bougie things. And I'm like, oh, but I also like a couple of years ago, like I had a gig and I took two guitars and I have a Novo Saris that I love my Novo.
Nice,
But the
nice,
other guitar I took that was not a backup, it was the guitar I took for certain songs, was an
hmm
Epiphone Firebird.
nice.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Don't care. It was a great
yeah.
guitar. That Epiphone is a killer guitar.
It's a great guitar.
I highly recommend if you're into Firebirds and don't want to pay for a Gibson, go get the Epiphone. It's a good one. Um,
Yep.
I
Also, the fretwork is better. Just saying.
Yes, the footwork's really good, especially on these new Inspired by. I
Hmm.
picked up a total tangent. I was in Jackson, Mississippi. I had a rehearsal. I had some time after the rehearsal. I stopped by a local music store, and they had one of the Epiphone Inspired by J45 acoustics.
Hmm.
Holy shit!
Yeah.
That guitar was not just amazing for the price. It was an amazing guitar. It's
Hmm.
probably the best sub $1,000 acoustic guitar I've ever played. It might be the
Yeah.
best sub $1,500 acoustic I've ever played. So I'm all about the current state of Epiphone right now. So y'all keep calling me bougie. Uh, but neither here nor there. You're gonna backtrack a little.
Oh, all good.
Oh yeah, it's they people get really caught up on stuff that doesn't matter. Is the
No.
best way to say it. They get really angry about it too. Just read
Yes.
the comments on YouTube.
Oh my
It
gosh. Yeah. So I recently started putting my um I started doing YouTube shorts with my
mhm,
TikTok.
yeah.
Completely different world. Um yeah. I don't I mean, like, one thing that's frustrating for me that sometimes I generally don't respond to negative comments, but as a woman,
Hmm.
I get a lot. I delete roughly about 100 comments a day that are completely inappropriate.
Yeah.
I don't care if someone doesn't like my work. I'll leave those negative comments up. Everybody's entitled
Sure.
to their own opinion. However, there's a line. So, I delete those and I don't bitch about it often. Sometimes I get to the end of my rope and I snarkily reply, which people tell me not to punch down, but I'm human.
Yeah.
So like they
Oh,
want those responses.
I just tell people I'm fueled by petty. That's like my
Yeah.
lifeblood. So
Yeah.
come at me.
But but I have trained other people, or people have worked for me, my apprentices, my former apprentices, they like they'll scroll through my comments and be like, I've never had this. Like for Henry, for example, Hank Bud Guitars.
Hmm.
He learned from me. I got him to do TikToks. He was not doing anything. I read his comments and like, dude, it must be really nice to be like a white man.
Yeah.
Like, this is completely different. And, he scrolls through mine and goes, holy, people treat you completely different.
Hmm.
And again, it's fine. People love to try and argue with me or tell me I'm doing stuff wrong when it's like, dude, I've worked for that company. I also wrote the installation guide for it, but whatever. Um, but I'm not going to do that if people don't know my history or who I've worked for.
Right.
Um, it doesn't really bug me. But YouTube, whole different
It,
world.
it's
I was
it's a
called
totally different thing.
yeah, like I just ignore it. Um, but it's funny. Like I don't. Or they're like, "Oh, don't care." I'm like, yeah, but you kind of cared enough to comment. I'm not gonna say
Right.
that because then it'll start
Right.
a whole thing. But like, I don't care. Yawn. And those are like the nice bad ones.
Thanks for the interaction,
But
I guess.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
Google
yeah.
doesn't care
But
what you said.
no, and that's the thing why I like leave those because I don't care.
Yeah.
And other people will start arguments, and that's up to them. It benefits me. Woo. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things where I make a point of still filming content and ignoring that so that
Hmm.
other people can see someone like them on screen being an expert in their field and not giving a
Yes.
shit. It makes me very uncomfortable to be on camera, but I want I want others to get excited about what I'm passionate about. So that's a big thing of like why I started the TikTok. It's like
Oh, sure.
I
And
didn't at that time I didn't see other people like me doing that.
but that's the thing. There's just not enough of them, and they're not. You
Yeah.
don't see them because we don't talk about it as much, and we should. Um,
Hmm.
it's something that I try to be very cognizant of, and I'm sure my listeners, my listeners by this point know that I'm not afraid of controversial or just stating my opinion and how I feel about things. So, um,
Yeah.
and
I
and
poke the
if
bear.
oh yeah,
I'll do
and
it.
see, I don't mind poking the bear. Actually, I'll tell you off air. The only time I've ever edited for content on this podcast, once. I don't edit for content. Sometimes I'll edit for technical problems or for,
Hmm.
you know, only once have I edited for content, and it was something I said, not something a guest said. And it was like
Oh.
one of those moments where I stopped and was like, you know what? I'm not ready to go down that rabbit hole. Um, it was on an episode with Emily Harris from Get Offset, and
Love Emily.
yeah, me too. And I
Emily
said
owns a
something.
Freya.
Oh, she does, absolutely does.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually, that was how I first saw, between
Oh,
TikTok and
cool.
her talking about the guitar.
Mhm.
I'm over in their Discord.
Oh, nice.
And she when I said it, Emily's eyes got real big, and I was like, that was a
Oh,
step too far, wasn't it? That was where I should have stopped. So anyway, neither here nor there. Um,
no.
I
Okay.
make it a point to have a lot of different people on this podcast, and I
Hmm.
post these on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you. Be sure to subscribe, please. Um, but I almost never delete comments because, again, it's like a comments, even if they're nonsensical, it's interaction,
Ex-
right? It's going to drive the
exactly.
algorithm. But
It helps you. Yeah.
I had Dominique Ruiz. I don't know if you know who Dominique Ruiz is. She's a Instagram guitarist, lives in Nashville, really talented, really wonderful human being. And I had her on the podcast, and
I'm gonna look.
she's an attractive 20 something blonde haired. You know what I mean?
Yep.
The
Yep.
comments that I have had to delete on that video,
Yeah.
just rude, just absolutely. And if anybody doesn't believe this happens, just let me tell you, I see it, because the only comments, so I have it turned on where YouTube holds certain comments for review, and
Yeah.
there's
Sorry, I
certain,
just found her on
oh
Instagram,
yeah,
so I wanted to be like, yeah, we follow each other. Cool.
yeah, she's very cool. I love Dominique. But the only videos I've ever had comments pop up on my comments held for review are for that video.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
absurd.
Yeah. It's
It's
weird
gross. It's
behavior.
just
It's
gross.
very
Yeah.
weird behavior. And yeah, and it's yeah, it's shocking. Like I never thought about it until Henry was like being like, "Hey, some weird stuff's happening on your thing." And I'm like, "Oh no, that's just normal. I haven't deleted it yet or blocked that person, you know?" And he was just like, "Wait, let me see your phone." And he's scrolling through and he was so disgusted.
Yeah.
I've worked in a shop with guys all my life. I've always been the only woman. I've never had a problem. Um there's companies I won't work for because of their culture problems,
Yeah.
but it's like in my shop, or like there's a local really well-known guitar shop called Rufus Guitar Shop.
Okay.
The chillest dudes ever, and they're like, long-haired metalhead guys, been in the industry forever, and they're so protective because they'll see,
Yes.
I would walk out of the back being the professional there to fix someone's guitar, and they would go, "What are your qualifications? You look like you're 14." And, and it's just like they had no tolerance. Get out of the shop. We are not repairing your instrument. Like that's
Like, really? I
so
mean,
silly. Yeah, they used to call me I worked at a shop in New York and they called me Morty, so that's my nickname. It's, "Oh, Morty's in the back. We'll just take it to him." Silly stuff like that.
it's so it's such a weird world, and guitar's always been, no, it hasn't always been, it's been kept a very much boys club kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even when we had, and to this day, we don't celebrate some of the guitarists. I mean, thankfully Sister Rosetta Sharp's getting the recognition she
Yeah.
deserves as a blues lover. That's a big
Yeah.
deal to me. But like, it's funny that I had a conversation the other day where somebody was, this is one of those subtle things, right? But for some reason it irked me that day. Somebody was talking about a Mary Kay Strat, and they referenced the makeup company, and I was like, you realize Mary Kay is a person that played that
That's
particular aesthetic of a guitar. It has
yeah.
nothing to do with the makeup company,
That's
right?
hilarious.
Yeah, I
I
was
haven't
like,
heard that yet, but I'm actually shocked I haven't heard that yet because it kind of
oh,
makes sense,
oh no, I've heard it
but it's
plenty.
funny.
Yeah, it's so
Really?
it's so funny. I've heard it more often than I'm comfortable saying, and by
That's
some
so
by
funny.
people who genuinely didn't mean it in
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a misogynistic way. That's
yeah,
literally what they thought. They didn't know, and
yeah,
and it's that knowledge that didn't pass, didn't get carried on. We
yeah.
don't talk about Mary Kay. We talk about Les Paul. You know what I mean? Don't get me
Right.
wrong. Les Paul did amazing things. Mary Kay was an incredible guitarist. We
Yeah,
talk about Chet
yeah,
Atkins. We don't talk about Mary Kay. Um,
yeah.
yeah, it's such a weird, some subtle things here and there that really
Hmm.
blow my mind that it's been allowed to continue as long as it did. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think it's like that's why I don't want to have to educate anybody. I'm not going to go into those comments and be like, "You are a misogynist," or you
right.
don't matter to me. In
That's
at the
because
end of the day, I'm going to be doing what I'm doing. So
you're here to
it's
build
very
guitars and teach other people to build guitars. That's what you want to do.
exactly. Yeah. And I have so many people that I've met that's not even a thought in their head, and that's just the modern world.
Yeah.
You can be whoever you
No.
want to be on the internet, but
Oh, that's a scary thing too. That's the scariest, is that you can be anyone you want to be on the internet. And I
hmm
think Twitter's proven that to us, how just scary
oh
that
my
can be.
gosh.
I won't go. I promise I won't go down the Twitter rabbit hole. That's
Oh man.
yeah, it's a rough time. So I actually did submit a couple of questions to my.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
asked my Patreon supporters for a couple of
Cool.
questions. Well, here's the problem. You actually answered all of them without, like, they wanted to know about starting a guitar business and marketing and all those things, and like you've answered all of that with just your story of how you got into this.
Oh,
So
yeah.
let's talk about, because we're going to go over and we're going to record a Patreon episode.
hmm
And all fair, I'm going to tell you about the one and only time I've edited for content, because that's a fun one. But listeners, want to say thank you for listening. We're gonna Meredith, I want to you to take a second. This is something I've not been good at, and I got called out on it, and I deserve to be called out on it. I want to give you a second
Aw.
to tell everybody where you can be found on the internet. Where can, where are all the places? They're all going to be linked below. So if she flies by all these and you didn't get them, they're down in the links. So where are you?
I can be found on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube as Coloma Guitars.
Okay. And
Yep.
website is?
ColomaGuitars.com.
There we go. And also, listeners, there's going to be a link below to the Indiegogo where you can order a Freya for yourself. Or if you don't need a guitar, you just want to get a T-shirt, or you just want to do the thank you. I wanted to make sure I got that right. There's all those links down below. Now, here's the deal, listeners. If you are listening to this episode after the close date of this Indiegogo, which is 19 days from today, so 13 days after launch or so. Look, y'all, I'm a guitarist. I'm not a mathematician. I can count to 4. That's all you need as a musician. So I'm not going to remove that link because I'm just know who I am. I'm not going to go back and remember. But if it's before that date, go check it out. I believe March 31st is the final day. That's easier than giving a number.
Yeah.
So go check it out. There's a whole bunch of really cool things available, as well as options to put a deposit in on a custom Freya. You can get a white Freya. You can get a road-worn blue Freya. There's walnut. There's so many cool ones. The Dance Macabre one is super rad. I love that one a lot. So I've been doing this. I've added a segment, and I realized I think I stole this from the Guitar Nerds, but they haven't done it the last few episodes, so that's okay. I don't know if you. So Blake over at the Tone Mob does some classic questions at the end of his podcast, and
Cool.
I was like, that's kind of a fun thing to have a regular question you ask at the end. But of course, I don't want to steal his questions. So mine is, I'm still deciding on a phrasing, but we'll call it. And I realize there may be nothing, but musical, like music wise, or what are you gassing for is the term I've been using, the gear acquisition syndrome. Anything you've been kind of peeking at that you're thinking about grabbing, thinking about adding to the collection a little bit?
Yes, I really want a tuna tone tulip bass.
Yes, she
So,
just posted those.
yes. Yes.
I
And I
I
think,
saw that.
yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's just like Layla is a great friend of mine, and that's one of the instruments that grabbed me. I love the color, I love the shape, I like all the brass appointments that she does, and the neck plates. Like even the neck plates are pieces of art.
Mm-hmm.
So
She makes
that's what
really,
I've been
really
wanting.
cool instruments. And they've been on my radar. Literally, she posted that this week, listeners, of us recording this
Hmm.
episode on her
Yeah,
Instagram. So go check that out.
there's a Reverb article and YouTube video that just came out with that bass in action. So I would check it out. It
Oh,
features Cindy guitars, a Telly by Cindy Guitars, the Tulip bass, and I think Rosencrantz, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure um, the third guitar.
oh, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I just pulled up a picture of it again to look at it again. It's
Mhm.
so rad. It's got like all of the like retro like Japanese import like
Yes.
stylings, but with like
Yeah.
actual modern professional build quality. Because
Oh, yeah,
as someone who
absolutely.
loves those and has played all those old Silvertones and Ks and all that
Yeah.
stuff, they don't usually play well without a lot of work. So,
No, like baseball bat necks, tiny little frets.
oh
Um,
yeah, scale lengths and intonation that just weren't even thought about. Um,
no,
yeah,
you just
it's
close
it's.
their eyes and we're like, this is where I'm sawing.
I've described a few as this is what it looks like when you ask a 5-year-old to draw a guitar, and then they made it.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
I love them. I love them. So awesome. So also listeners, check out Tuna Tone. They're very, very rad. I want to do a quick shout out for all of my Patreon supporters. Thank you so much. I like to call you out by name because your support means a ton to me. So thank you, Duncan Watson. I'm sorry, in no particular order. Duncan Watson, Andy Johns, David Evangelista of the Guitar Dads podcast, Josh Gierkin, Blake Jefferson, Nick Call, Andrew Hensley, Alan Gresham, Dan Pilver of Lewitt Microphones, Scott Hamilton of the Effects Loop podcast, Andy Koning, Jim Burns, Tom Kelly, Heath Batt, Ben Fair of Electromotive Sound Pedals. I told y'all he'd be back. Rick Calhoun of Honey Picks, Jeffrey Walks, and Kyle Harris. Thank you all for your support. You literally keep this show going. I just talk a lot. So I appreciate all of your support. Meredith, thank you so much for being on the show this week.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. And we're going to go over to Patreon. And listeners, in the meantime, until you hear my voice again, be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and make some noise.